Hello and welcome to the virtual Kansas City SQL Server user group. Thanks for joining our Lunch and Learn. We are happy to welcome Chris Hyde to our user group this afternoon, discussing my new favorite toy, Data, the Fabric of Our Lives. For the audience, the session is recorded and will be uploaded to our YouTube channel if everything works out as we planned. Once the recording is ready, I will place the link inside the Meetup event. For Q&A, you can come off of mute or write them in the chat and I will ask them as they come along for Chris. And as always with our Lunch and Learns, we jump right in. And with that, I will hand it over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Christina. Let me share. And you've got the presentation up?
Yes, it is.
Great. Let's go. Okay, thank you everyone for having me today. I'm Chris Hyde. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a data platform MVP. I've been doing this BI and analytics stuff for 20 plus years, which sounds kind of scary. I run the data platform group out in Albuquerque. The most important bit on this slide is the bottom right. If you like the session, use Twitter or X. Let everyone know how good it is. They should come see it when they get a chance. If you don't like the session, well, that's what the email's for. Just let me know what I could do better the next time. And so I have to apologize. I was supposed to speak to you all last month, but I was pretty sick. You'll hear some residual coughing, I'm sure, through the next hour, and I apologize for that. But thank you for letting me come back, and sorry that I wasn't able to make it last time around. Yeah, and get ready for tons of awkward pauses while I'm taking a sip of water. So what we're going to talk about today is this is a 100 level overview of Microsoft Fabric, right? It's not a deep dive. Fabric's huge. We wouldn't have time to get into it at all. But this isn't intended to be in great detail. Like if you've gone through all the Microsoft Learn sections and you've watched all the Guy in a Cube videos, I'll be honest, I'm not going to tell you anything today that you probably don't already know. So let's get that out there. This is sort of aimed at you're a data professional, you've heard there's a lot of buzz about Microsoft Fabric, but you don't know what it is. So that's where we're focused today. So I'll introduce you to OneLake, the concept of lakehouse architecture, but OneLake is sort of the version here of a data lake that Fabric is built on and sort of becomes the basis from which everything works. We'll discuss the different components of Fabric, and I'll give you demos for some of them, kind of intermingled throughout. But we won't have time to do a demo of every single piece that we touch. All right, I'm coughing more than I expected, so I'm going to pop a cough drop. Sorry about that. So what is Microsoft Fabric? Well, it's the next generation all-in-one data analytics product. And it's brand new. It's only been in GA for a month. It was announced at Ignite last month. It's in GA. It's been in public preview since Microsoft Build in May. Sorry, so it's been available to play with since May, but it's only been generally available and production worthy since about a month. So what we've got here is a full integration of our data warehousing tools, our data engineering tools, our data science tools. We're going to put them in the same portal as Power BI that everyone's already using for reporting and data visualization. It's got a huge installed customer base. So let's put in those other analytics tools into the same place and make it like a one-stop shop, right? Because let's think about if we're in AWS for this right now. So I might be, what am I using to pull in data? Maybe Airflow. And I'm doing transformations on that in the AWS Databricks, and maybe I'm landing it in Snowflake. Maybe I'm using Tableau to do the visualization. Well, let's 4 different products, and we've got to make them all tie together. And even in the Azure cloud, right, until recently, you've had to kind of do the same thing. But the idea here is let's put everything into one place. Let's make everything talk to each other natively. That's going to be much easier to use. Yeah, your data analysts, you don't want them having to like write code in Databricks to access a key vault to be able to, talk to the data warehouse just to pull the data back. In the first place, you want them to just be able to start writing queries against the data as soon as possible. So this is designed more as a software as a service model. It's all one piece, just like, Power BI, rather than a platform as a service where you have to, connect those platforms together with nuts and bolts. But the other big thing we're doing here is we're basing this on the concept of one copy of our data in this one lake data lake. Right, as BI practitioners, we've spent so much of our time just moving data around and making a copy of the data and making a slightly different copy of the data over here. And every time we're moving data, putting it somewhere else, duplicating it. We want to take that all out the window, just have one set of data, one place, right? Sounds great, right? So here's what we're talking about. If I'm saying software as a service and platform as a service, if those terms are new to you, here's a little slide to sort of explain what this is. And I've got a few slides like this throughout the deck. These are not my slides. They're made by a guy named Christophe Meunier, who works for Microsoft in France. There's a whole bunch out there. There's a lot of detail in, so I'm not really going to be going into the detail of these slides. They're also sort of like an added bonus or an incentive after the talk for you to go to my GitHub, download the slide deck, and you'll have these extra benefits. All right, so here is the foundation of our software as a service. As I said, we've got one lake in the middle. That's our center point. And then we've got Data Factory, which is just a version of Azure Data Factory to do our data flows. We have our Synapse data engineering experience, that's our Spark pools, our Synapse data warehousing, which is the serverless Synapse today, our data science integration, our real-time analytics Custo engine, and of course, Power BI for reporting. So everything's all, I'm going to, you'll be sick of hearing me say this, but everything's in the one place, the one ecosystem. So this one lake piece, Microsoft would like you to think of it as the OneDrive for data, right? They want it to be as easy for everyone to use for data as OneDrive is for file sharing. And that means not just for the like what I mean, I don't really like the terms here, but what they call like a data professional versus a citizen developer, right? The data professionals are the people that have the job. The job title is like DBA or data analyst 3. The citizen developers are our super users. They're the people that are great with Excel. Maybe they can write some simple queries, but we just make it really difficult for them to really interact with, the sort of the IT-based data ecosystem. So we want one place. Let's make it easier for everybody. We've got full compatibility with the current version of Azure Data Lake. We've got the ability to put shortcuts in which allow data virtualization. So when I say data virtualization, what I mean is we're pointing to data that's somewhere else. It could be in another Azure Data Lake. It could be in an Amazon S3 bucket. And we can read that data just as though it was in our own data estate. just as like a shortcut on your desktop takes you straight to an executable on your computer and you don't notice the difference. Same principle here. And all this data that we're using, it's going to be stored in an open source format called Delta Parquet. We'll talk more about that in a second. But it's notable that this is the Microsoft Analytics platform of the future, and all the underpinnings are open source. So this is really a sea change, definitely a different paradigm for Microsoft, and great sign for where they're moving going forward. They've also fairly recently added a file explorer utility, so you have a desktop utility to be able to interact with the files in your OneLake as well. You don't need to use the Power BI and a portal to interact with it. You can just use this file explorer to move files around. So here's everything I've just said in a more colorful way and much more artistically than I could present it. Again, yeah, I'd love to have you all go back. And Christine, if you wouldn't mind dropping the GitHub link back into the chat, just to make sure that everyone has it.
Yep, and I've already put it in the Meetup.
Perfect. All right, so here's a sort of a more detailed version of the foundation. We've got all of our 6 tools on the top. We've got our OneLake here. So what we're highlighting here is a couple of things. So first, emphasizing whether our data is in a warehouse or a lakehouse or a CustoDB for real-time analytics, or in a Power BI semantic model, formerly known as a data set. All that data is really a Delta Parquet file sitting in OneLake. And one of the big advantages of OneLake is we can have one security layer above it all. We don't need to set up separate security layers for each of our different tools. Everything can access the one security model that we're setting up. So again, not just one place for data, but one place for the security on top of that data. And then we interact with it using serverless compute. So our Synapse data warehousing, we're using T-SQL. Our data engineering against our lakehouse, we're using Spark, PySpark, Python. The CustoDB, we're using KQL, aka Custo, and Power BI, that back engine is going to, instead of interacting with the the old Vertipack style of storing data, is going to directly interact with our Delta Parquet semantic models. All right, any questions so far? I know you all are really quiet, and it's difficult to have that kind of in-person interaction with your lunchtime audience, but you definitely would like to hear people jump in with questions as much as possible.
And so far.
All right. All right, so here's a quick intro to that Delta Parquet format that we've talked about. So Delta is sort of a layer on top of Parquet. We'll talk about in a minute. So let's just talk about basic Parquet. So it's kind of like, I have the analogy that if a CSV file is like a normal SQL Server row store table, the Parquet is like a SQL column store table. Again, it's an open source format, but the data is stored as columns, which when we're looking at like our really large fact tables, for example, think about all the times you've got, duplicate data somewhere. So many products are the same price, or so anything that can get duplicated over a large fact table, your customer keys are going to be duplicated all the time. Well, let's not store everything every time it comes up, like you would in a row store. Let's store it once and then a pointer to it for each row of data. And that's going to give us some pretty substantial space savings, right? And because, IO is generally the biggest limiting factor in speed these days. CPU is, fairly cheap. We can spin up big clusters, shut them down, while we need them. You know, that extra overhead to you know, you know, decrypt or to parse that parquet is really pretty nothing compared to how much space we save and how much less I/O we need. So it can make like our analytics workloads, blazing fast. Even like the simple file that we'll show in our first demo, I think it's a 3 MB file, and just turning it into a Parquet table takes it down to 0.5 MB. So a 1 in 6 compression, just even putting it in Parquet without any optimization. All right, so this is sort of uh, based on the lakehouse paradigm of analytics workloads. So this is something that was proposed by the Databricks company in some white papers just a few years ago. But it's an open architecture that combines the best elements of data lakes and data warehouses. Right. So there's some things that those, they don't both do well. Right. Data warehouses aren't great for unstructured data, which is why data lakes started popping up in the first place. But data warehouses are still super fast for structured relational data. Let's bring everything together. Let's take the best of both parts. This gives us an architecture that's got 10 key features we'll talk about in the next couple of slides. And then it's often organized in something called medallion architecture, which we'll talk about on a slide after those two. So what are the key features? Well, first off, we want the same transaction support that you would get from a database system, right? Because data lakes don't have that. You just drop in a new file, no ACID support, right? So let's make sure our lakehouse does have that. Let's make sure that the schema is enforced and governed, and any changes to the schema that we capture that delta, right? Again, data lakes historically not great at capturing that. You can put in any old JSON data, right? So we want it to be able to support like a myriad BI tools, right? There's a lot of warehouses only support like 1 or 2 BI tools historically. A lot of times the tool is tied right into the engine that supports it. So we want to make this open so that whether you're using Power BI or Tableau or ClickView or anything else that can read Parquet files, it can use the data in the lakehouse. And so part of that, we're decoupling the storage from the compute. We've got our storage in our one lake, but then as we saw in the previous slide, we can throw different types of computing resources at it. We can use a custo cluster. We can use T-SQL in a serverless, T-SQL in a serverless pool. Like we're bringing the choice of compute, and we're bringing it only when we need it, right? We don't have an on-premises server that has to be beefy enough to run our ETL overnight. Let's just spin up, a very wide cluster for 10 minutes to do our ETL processes. We've talked about open standards. That's key here. We're not locking into, we're not locking into, say, a SQL Server MDF file, just open Parquet, which can be, moved to a different cloud. Yeah, no worries. Here's one of the most important pieces is that it works well both for structured and unstructured data, right? Data warehouses handle structured data like a champ. Data lakes, great for unstructured data. Yeah, let's put that both together. Yeah. And let's support multiple types of analytics workloads. So it's not just, our data visualization tool, right? It's also our data science tool. It's being able to put, you know, Spark clusters against it for huge volumes. So anything that we can think of to do because it's open, again, because that storage and compute are decoupled, we're going to be able to support those multiple types of workloads very easily. Right? We want to make sure that it can handle real-time streaming data. That's something traditional data warehouses don't always do as well as others. But we want the full, security and access control, the full data governance, the data cataloging that have been, historically easier to implement in a warehouse. Yeah, we want to keep that as we move to this combined model. And so we're not using just plain run-of-the-mill Parquet. We're using something called Delta Parquet, or probably to be more accurate, Parquet in the Delta format. I mean, that's probably pedantic, or just Delta, right? Every Delta file is a Parquet file. Not every Parquet file is a Delta file because they don't have that Delta layer on top. That Delta layer is what gives us the compatibility for the ACID transactions, and it'll capture as our schema changes as well. And I mentioned medallion architecture. So if you've been working with data lakes, you probably had something like a raw zone, a curated zone, maybe an in-between zone. And those different zones would mean different things. We've got a similar structure here. We want like a bronze layer. That's where we bring in our raw data. It's our staging layer. But then we might have a silver layer where we start cleansing and conforming that raw data. Maybe we're putting it into a third normal form structure uh, to make it, to easily work with the relationships between data entities. But then ultimately, we're going to have the final curated and transformed layer. This is probably going to be in a denormalized star schema, still facts and dimensions. And so those are our three different layers. And we've got a little link here for you all to learn more about this. So let's jump into our first demo. I know I've been talking quite a bit here. So I'm going to jump over to my Power BI portal, right? Standard Power BI portal that we're used to seeing. Now down here, if I click on the Power BI icon, I've got some new items for data engineering, science, warehouse analytics, all the different components that we've talked about. And in fact, one that we haven't that's pretty new called Data Activator. So if you've got Power BI in your organization, you can have your administrator turn these features on for you. It's already there. Nothing else has to be installed. Of course, there could be, a cost involved. We'll talk about that later. But the thing that we really need for Fabric is we need a workspace. We need a place to store, our warehouses, our lake houses. So that's going to be in something called a workspace. Let's go ahead and create a new lake house. Awesome.
There you go.
There we go. Looks like it wasn't finished clearing up my previous demo.
Yep.
So we've got a space here for tables and files. So I'm going to bring some data in. We could use our data factory to bring something in for a pipeline. I'm just going to go ahead and pull in data from a file. So I've got some sales data out here. I will upload it. Let's do refresh. Come on. There we go. So here is our standard sales CSV, right? So let's put this into one of our Delta tables. So I'm just going to right click on here, load to tables, new table, sales, tell it how to parse the CSV. Give it a minute here. So let me head back to my workspace and go back into my lakehouse sometimes. That all right, let's try that again. Okay, I thought it said it had finished, but it is still going. So let's see how long that takes to finish. This is the fun part of demoing something that is brand new. Things have changed slightly between when you've touched it before. So I want to talk about this as I go back to my workspace and I'm looking at all the items in my workspace. We see that we created the lake house, but we also created a couple of things. So we created a semantic model, formerly known as a Power BI data set, that's created by default. So as soon as we've put data into our tables, it becomes immediately available for us to use in Power BI. We've also created the SQL endpoint, which means this data that we've brought in, we can immediately query it in SQL. For some versions of the word immediate. All right, let's. All right, I'm not sure why that. Let's. Yeah, let's go ahead and see if we can delete this. Oh, sure. Now it comes back. Successfully created sales table. Of course.
Of course.
All right, it said that. Was it lying to me? No, it was not lying. So let's pull up our preview.
While that's pulling up, we did have a question come in that said on the last side on the far right, it looked almost like a graph. What was that?
I'm sorry, the last slide.
Yeah, that's what the question said. I'm not quite.
Okay, so let's go back a bit and see.
Nope, I don't see it.
If that looks like a graph, that could be referring to Power
icon.
BI.
Yeah.
Okay. If you can clarify that. Sorry, we missed it as it came through.
They may have meant the last screen.
Okay. All right. So let's see a couple of things here. First off, where did we put it? So we can view the files here. So we have, here is our underlying Parquet file. Here we see it's about 1/6 the size of the file that we uploaded. But then here is our Delta log, and that tracks what we've done. We've created our table. It's this size. We've added, 32,000 records to it from this sales order number to, the we'll have the minimum values. Here's what the first one we put in. Here's the last row we put in. And if we were making changes, bringing things into and out of this table, we would be logging all of those within that Delta file. Right, so we are also able to, let's go ahead and, where do I want to go for this? Let's go back here and let's go to my SQL endpoint. So I've got my sales table. I can go ahead and write a new SQL query. Right. And if I've got, some existing data in here, right, I could join this together like you would anytime with SQL. So how many times do we have, an end user, a super user, they've got a new file that they want to integrate into their reports. And at the moment, it's got to go through a long, laborious IT process to get that into the data warehouse. But all they really needed was just upload the file, mix it with some other data, do a quick graph in Power BI, and done. So we're, by putting everything in one place, we're helping that kind of user access those things, very quickly. We can even use a visual query here if they're more used to, let's drag the table. Well, if they've worked in, this is it's a little slow for me today. But if they're used to working in Power BI using the visual query editor in there, they can have that kind of experience there. They don't need to use SQL, but if they already know it, they've got it. And so we've got this Delta table that, historically you'd need to open up Databricks and write some Python code to create, to have data in that format. You see, we just, uploaded a file and right-clicked, basically, and hit OK. And that's how we created our Delta file here. So very easy for, again, I don't like the term, but our citizen developers to use, as well as our IT pros.
We do have a quick
All right.
question that
Sure.
asks if it, and I'll let you answer this, if it will work with Tableau, similar how it works with Power BI.
It will. You can expose the, you can make the Parquet files available to your Tableau. I've not done that, but I know that you can with the right security. So if you're already using Tableau, great, you don't have to change to Fabric. But I will say, the cost of Power BI is included in your Fabric. So why wouldn't you? But that's probably a different question. But you certainly could use Tableau to access the Parquet data. All right, so let's jump back over to our slides. So that's the lakehouse. So we've also got the data warehouse. So that's a more traditional T-SQL-based data warehousing experience. Structured data, probably in a star schema. You can query it with the T-SQL code or the visual editor, but it's still stored in the open source Parquet format. Right? So this is kind of designed for the folks that maybe you've heavily invested in SQL developers. Those are your BI professionals. You don't need to relearn, retool to learn Spark. You can basically lift and shift with a couple of caveats, but lift and shift into the data warehouse and use the serverless, the equivalent of today's Synapse serverless pools. Right, so let's see some of that. So I'm going to go over to my workspace. I'm going to go ahead and where are we? Create a warehouse. Maybe I should have powered up my Fabric engine for the meeting. Here we go. We've got a warehouse. So let's go ahead and start populating it. First thing I'm going to do is create a couple of schemas. Let's create a dim schema for our dimensions. Let's create a fact schema. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and run this script that just creates our objects and creates all of our data for it. This will take probably 30 seconds to run. So if there are any other questions, this is a perfect time to jump in.
Of course, now we don't have any. Isn't that how it always goes?
Yeah. All right, well, let's make sure the sound of me crunching the end of my cough drop is clearly audible on the YouTube video. That'll be
I was
fantastic.
right there with you earlier.
Yeah.
I do have a question. So have you seen, like, when we're talking about One Lake, have you seen any contention issues with having one copy of the data, or do you think Parquet kind of alleviates that problem?
So I haven't seen any contention issues, but there could be some, right? There is locking and blocking, right? That's what gives us our ACID compatibility. But I've not, in everything that I've played with, I haven't run across anything. I'd have to really like engineer something and have multiple things set up. And even then, I think we're just waiting for a lock to resolve most of the time. And that's why I haven't seen any contention issues.
Sure.
All right. Oh, this is nice. It actually went through. I didn't need to refresh, so I've got my standard dimension tables. I've got my fact table. I can click on it for preview. I can do a new SQL query. So, and I think let's see, I prepared one so I'm not typing straight in the demo. It's standard, querying a fact table, joining in dimensions, and just standard groups. Yeah, everything that you'd expect. And I want to point out here, we're still within the same tab we've always been in. Everything is browser-based, everything's the same Power BI portal, so it's all in one place. We're not switching back and forth between different tools. We're all in the same window, and there's the data. Now, also, let me pop over to model. Nice. Here is our, well, I don't really want the internal tables here. Let's bring it is a little bit closer. So let's set up our relationship between the two. So here's our customer key. Here's our product key. Our sales order date. Right? Everything's joined together, so we know how everything works. Ah, I did do this earlier. I'm not sure why it's telling me that I don't have it now. Oh, that is unfortunate. Let me go back to our lake house or
Constant changes in Power BI.
yeah, see if it'll let me in.
They get me every time.
Okay. Well, for those of you who've used Power BI, you know what Power BI looks like already. The idea is that, we just created everything super quickly. We joined, put it in our joins, so we've got our referential integrity, and boom, right away we can start creating Power BI reports. So, very simple again, all in one. We're not, standing up one service, loading data from another service, opening up our visualization service. Everything was in, one place. So, question that always comes up is, should I build a lake house or should I build a warehouse? Right. So these are the most important considerations. Uh, if you're dealing with a lot of unstructured data, it's not just structured, you probably want a lake house. If it's only structured, maybe the warehouse is a good option. If your team is used to using Spark and that ecosystem, and so they know Python, they know PySpark, uh, Lakehouse is great. If they only know T-SQL, well, maybe we'll stay in a Fabric warehouse instead of an on-premises warehouse. Right? If we've got super complex data structures, aka XML, JSON that we're storing. Again, Lakehouse is probably the best. We've denormalized our data, put it in, facts and dimensions. Warehouse is super great for that. And then if our users are mainly data scientists and data engineers, they're probably more used to a Lakehouse experience. If our users are SQL developers and data analysts writing queries in SQL, then the warehouse is the thing that's going to work easiest for them. Now at the bottom, here's a link to a video from Advancing Analytics out of the UK, where Simon Whiteley goes into this question for about 25 minutes and ends up concluding, lake house, lake house, lake house. And I'm not saying he's wrong, because I think at the moment the implementation of warehouse has some limitations that I'm not super comfortable with. But this is a new product. As we start building everything out over the next few months, right? I think warehouse is going to be, you know, just as good an option for Lakehouse, in the right circumstances. And again, here's another of Christoph's slides going into more and more detail here about which one you might choose versus the other one. Now, one other thing to keep in mind is you can use both. There's no one, it's not one or the other. So if you've got a group that is used to using the warehouses, maybe like your CRM system, the people dealing with that system are used to writing SQL, well, you can set up a customer warehouse. And people using the sales system, they've got some Spark people, so they set up a lakehouse. You can mix and match the data from those two places. The lakehouse, you can set a shortcut to your warehouse right in your lakehouse. Again, it's all Parquet under the, behind the scenes, right? We're just creating one copy of the data. We're not, having to, oh, well, our customer data is in our warehouse. We need to copy it over to our lakehouse to analyze it. No, we just add one of those shortcuts. And the warehouse data behaves for us virtually like it's already in the lakehouse. So ultimately, it's not really a one or the other discussion. especially in large enterprises where they can have multiple analytics teams, right? There's there's no need to choose one or the other. They can have one team do lakehouse, one team do warehouse, no problem. Uh, so we've also got the classic Synapse data science experience. So we're using our notebooks to train our models. We set up some experiments to evaluate them, and then we can store those models in the workspace to be used, by our lakehouse or by our warehouse, through shortcuts. Again, this is one I don't have a demo for, but we've got a link here if you'd like to learn more. Again, I'm not going to set up a big high-speed real-time analytics streaming solution just to do a demo, right? But we've got that capability available. It's the kind of thing that's optimized for time series analysis. Maybe we've got a whole bunch of sensor data coming in and we want to see how something changes over time. That's what, the real-time analytics piece here is perfect for. Now, right now, this is Cousteau only. So even though this piece is, Parquet behind the scenes, just like any of the others, right? For some reason, we can still only use KQL right now. I mean, I'm guessing that's going to change at some point to, allow people that, know SQL, don't know Cousteau to be able to write SQL against that real-time data. But that's not in the product just yet. All right. Power BI, as we all know and love, the best thing we're adding here is something called direct lake mode. So let's look at this, right? So we've always had sort of a problem with Power BI. We want real-time data, but if we want real-time data, we have to use direct query to go back to our lakehouse or warehouse, right? And that's not always super speedy. But if we want it to be super speedy, we do an import of our data set into, the Vertipack engine. And, we can, query that. It's super fast. But there's some latency because maybe we're only doing our refreshes every day or every hour. And it's also duplicative, right? We're making another copy of all that data in the Power BI data set. Well, now in Fabric, we've got this ability, this direct lake model, which has all the benefits of direct query, being able to capture the data that's in our Delta tables in real time. But because that data is there, because they've figured out, some magic of, querying Delta Parquet very, very efficiently, we are, right up to date without having to make that second copy of the model and have it on a schedule. So this is truly the best of both worlds. All right, but there's a catch. There's always a catch. Let's go over. And the other catch is I can't see it because it's behind my my presentation window. So let me pull up another copy of that here. So there's still some things that they are working on, right? In order to do that direct lake, currently we can only look at a single lake house or warehouse at a time. And there's a few data types that aren't supported. Tables based on T-SQL views can't be queried in direct lake mode. No, some of these, this is a sort of as it is. Some of these things are, you can see, well, not yet supported, right? So they're clearly, obviously working on these. So, this is the future. This is where they're still going, but we're a month into, production, right? So, this is where they're going. Super fast, real time Power BI against true enterprise scale data. All right. Yeah, as we guess I can't do that. piece based on the error message we saw earlier. So let's talk about the cost. Everyone wants to know this thing. So first off, we've separated, our compute and our storage. So we're going to pay for them separately. Our storage, and these prices, can vary from region to region, but this is a pretty standard one. I think West 2 right now is 2.3 cents a gig per month for data. So that works out to be what, $23 a terabyte a month. Yeah, that's not too bad. That's, pretty much nothing for most of the companies that we work for. The capacity, though, that's what is being sold. That's basically the amount of compute that's available. And that's sold as a capacity unit. I'm not sure exactly the relationship between a capacity unit and, say, a core. Uh, it's not quite as simple as that, but let's think about that, sort of analogously. We've got every power of 2 from 2 to 2048. And we're going to pay, say we have an F2. That's going to be 18 cents per CU per hour, so 36 cents an hour, $9 a day, about $300 a month. But we've got something called bursting and smoothing. So how many of us, like, let's say that 2 CUs is equal to 2 cores. I don't think it is. But let's just think of that as 2 cores, right? And that we may have a 2-core machine, but we don't have, all the CPUs in those 2 cores pegged at 100% all the time, right? We may have, some periods where we're using a lot of power, and then some periods where we're using almost nothing. Essentially, when we're buying capacity, we're buying the average capacity that we need. So we might have, an F2, we've got a workload that requires an F8 for a while. That's okay. It'll spin up to that large size, run everything there, and then scale itself back down to the F2. Now we can't do that, all day. We'll get rate limited back to our average. But that compute that we've used is smoothed out over a day-long period to give us an average. So yeah, whereas kind of before, a lot of the times you're always thinking, what is our peak usage? That's what we need to size our VM or on-premises server as. But here we're actually sizing based on our average. Right. And so these rates, I think the storage rate is set. The capacity rate here, this is the pay-as-you-go rate. You can also get what they call reserved capacity, which is like a commitment to, I don't remember how many years, but usually somewhere between 1 to 3 years, and you get between a 40 and 60% discount on that. I don't remember the exact numbers right now, but that does exist. So if you're a company that wants to use this, you want to commit to buying it, you can get it at a pretty substantial discount. And then, if you're creating any, the Power BI reports based on your Fabric data, you will still need to have the same Power BI licenses that you have today. So, pro user to view the shared content, the extra premium, $20 a seat for, the Power BI premium features, you'll still need that on top of your Fabric. As it says up here in the corner, there is a free 60 days trial, which you can use. You can get your administrator to set this up for you. You can set up an individual one. The only thing is it has to be like with an email address that can have a Power BI tenant. right? So you can't set this up with a Gmail, for example. You have to have, some email address for which you could set up, your own, named tenant. Let's see. So you can see here with this little chart, 300 bucks a month isn't too bad. As you scale up to very, very powerful fabric capacities, you're paying quite a lot of money. Uh, Now, when you set up your trial, you don't have to worry about this until after 60 days. You can still do this, play with this fairly cheaply after your 60 days. What you have to do is go into your Azure portal and pause your capacity. So I've got an F4 running right now. That's what we're demoing everything off. So it's going to cost me, in this hour that we're looking at about 72 cents. I'll just go in after the presentation is over, turn it off. And that's it. That's all I've paid to do everything today. When I want to maybe run through some other learnings and practice, I just unpause the capacity and start start billing again. And all the regular Azure billing things, like the limits that you can set up, the warnings, you're going to want to set those up. If you're going to play with these outside the trial as well.
Can you get additional discounts for like reservations?
Yeah, that's the reserved capacity I was mentioning. That's, I think, 40 to 60%
Okay, yep.
generally. Uh, yeah, I don't remember I know they tweeted about it right at GA. I always go back and look for the tweet when I want to see what
Yep.
the prices are.
I'm sure it will be
Where
tweaked
was
over
I? No,
time
I
as
was there.
well.
Yeah, and they can change in different regions as well. I'm sure all the U.S. regions are set, pretty standard at the moment. But you could find that in some regions it's a little bit cheaper as well. All right, so I'm gonna leave you all with some resources, but I really didn't have my sort of soapbox moment yet, so I'm gonna take that now. Right. So I think it's very easy to look at Fabric right now and say, this isn't quite ready for prime time. And I probably agree with you. But I will say you would have said the same thing about Power BI in the first few months when that came out, right? And then immediately Power BI comes out with new things, and every single month new things are added to Power BI to where it's the amazing enterprise scale visualization tool it is now. But that's what's going to happen with Fabric. Microsoft is all on board with Fabric. So while they're not ripping out anything that's there, I feel pretty confident that the vast majority of their resources are driving Fabric as this is their tool. This is the Microsoft analytics solution for large enterprises, for small businesses, for everything. This is the one-stop shop for everything. This is where all the different teams are rowing in the same direction, to use the cliche. So while we're not, where we want to be, we need to be watching. This is where, if you're in the BI space, you need to be paying attention to Fabric. You need to start working with it, as soon as possible. Because we're in the same place that Power BI was when that first came out, and look where Power BI is today. So that's my soapbox moment. Take that as you will, but that's the advice that the advice I'm giving myself too in my own career. All right, so we've got some resources here I think Christina already shared the first link. That's to my GitHub blog where you can find the slide deck. I've got a couple of Microsoft links. I think the first one is the general marketing spiel. The second one is the hub for all their Learn Live documentation, all the modules that you can go through and practice with your trial capacity. Yeah, they've done a great job putting a lot of material out there, a lot of good real world examples. So I'd encourage everybody to, go to that link and start working through these things. I think maybe the Fabric Learn link is probably a shortcut to the one above it. And then we've also got uh, now we actually have a roadmap. That was fairly, I think maybe until October. Those of us playing with it in public preview, like we don't know what's coming next. We don't know when it's coming next. Please tell us when. And now there is a set document that's set up. Lets us know what's coming that they can talk about, like what things are in public preview. Uh, I don't know whether they'll say when they expect to go into production, but we do have that full roadmap document. And then some video resources. So that first one is, there's a link to like 15 to 20-minute webinars about each of the different experiences within Fabric. So if you were disappointed that I didn't demo the real-time analytics, that's a place where you can go watch a 20-minute video that is mostly demo. And then the last piece is, if you're not already watching Guy in a Cube videos and you're in the analytics space, well, you need to change that. Adam and Patrick and their guests is super entertaining, super informative. And here's a playlist that they've set up, which is all the Fabric videos on YouTube in one place. So I'd encourage, all of you to watch as many of those as possible. Let me leave this up for the links. If there's any you'd like me to copy and paste into the chat, I can do that. But I'd love to hear any questions that you have left. And we've just about hit the hour mark, but I'm happy to stick around as long as there are questions.
I've got some thank yous for your presentation. I really like the visualizations you showed of Christoph's. You don't really see them that often, and the format of them I really like because it's less formal than we typically see with some of the Microsoft stuff. And I
Yeah,
really
for
really
those of
appreciate
you who don't know,
this.
I didn't highlight the link there, but there is, I think last time I went, there was maybe 20 of these.
Yeah.
And I just used a few. So yeah, I encourage everyone to go to that Fabric Notes link in the bottom left and look through those.
Yeah, and I really like that you explained that medallion architecture. There's been so many times that I've seen um, people just kind of gloss over that and say, "Oh, bronze, silver, gold layer, blah 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 blah," and then I watch the audience or I hear from the audience later, like, what does that mean? So I really appreciate that you broke that down and explained that.
Thanks. And I think that's something that's probably going to be interpreted slightly different by different organizations too. So this is
Yeah,
like,
yeah, but it gives people a good
combination of
idea
my
of what
take
that
and
means,
what,
right?
yeah, combination of my take and what Databricks would like you to use.
Yeah.
I think this is.
Yeah, a lot of people in the ETL space can easily, oh, okay, so that's my staging data. That's my this, kind of go through it and it makes sense.
Yeah.
Well done. You kind of stole. I was going to ask you, you know, because we always hear all the great things about fabric. And I was going to say, what was your least favorite? But you kind of turned that on me because you admitted right up front it's not all the way there yet, but it's here's the roadmap and it's going there. So I really appreciate that. We do have a
Yeah.
question real quick that says,
Okay.
if we uploaded new sales.csv, can the table data auto refresh or does it require a manual action?
Let's see. I don't think that we can. Yeah, I don't think that we can do that with just like mouse clicks. I think we'd have to, spin up a quick notebook uh, and write some PySpark. Uh, Although from the demos I've seen of people using Copilot
Hmm.
to do some of that, you
Yeah.
might be able to get it to basically write itself for you. I just haven't played with it myself enough to
And
be
I
able
wonder
to say one way or another.
if that's where the data activator may come into play. I haven't looked at it at all, but with its triggering capability, maybe there's
Yeah,
some stuff that would be in there as well.
yeah. But yeah, I think generally you're going to do something similar in production. You'll do something similar to you have today. You would have scheduled pipeline jobs, and they're running PySpark notebooks to do all the delta merges and the same things that you would do in any other Apache Spark based yeah analytics solution.
Yep. Yep. Well, thank you so much. We had several people saying thank you and great presentation, great presentation and demo, nice information. Thank you so much for your presentation. Thank you for your time today. Great introduction to Fabric, just a bunch of them. So we really appreciate you taking your time today. And so
Yeah,
Yeah,
we,
thanks,
thank you all for
Chris.
having me. Yeah, sorry I had to make you all wait a month for it. Hope
oh,
it
no
was worth the
problem, no
Okay.
wait.
problem.
Hmm.
We wanted you to be healthy, so we understand.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Thank
Absolutely.
you, everybody. And if you're like me, you'll come up with a question 5 minutes after we drop off. Yeah. Hit me up on Twitter. Hit me up on that Gmail that I gave on the first slide. Let me just I'll drop that in the chat. I'm the same in both places. So yeah, I'd love to hear from you all with any questions if you think of them later.
Yeah. Okay. Karen saying, we forgive you. And then
Thanks, Karen.
Natalie saying, thank you for sharing. So a lot of people super happy. Thank you
Right.
so much. Appreciate it.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
And
Right.
that concludes our lunch and learn today. Thanks for joining us. See you later.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.